We like visiting with Pete Wehner. He's a senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center. He writes for Commentary Magazine. We don't always agree entirely, but he keeps coming back for more, so for that I'm eternally thankful. Pete, today's subject, I think we ought to talk about the color of the neon lights that will spell out Trump on the side of the White House after Trump gets elected. What color do you think they'll be? Blue? Green? Orange?
I have to run to the bathroom.
You think they'll light up? I mean, because listen, it's a White House, and you can get beautiful neon. I mean, you've seen his signage. Donald's all about signage.
You know, you're right, and whatever it's going to be great looking. We know that with Donald Trump. Maybe the White House will be as great looking as the Great Wall of Trump on our southern border.
Why do I keep seeing your face in my mind when I see a story like the one the other day I saw that he's hit 40% in Alabama, and I see you clutching your side, breaking out into hives, saying what? I mean, all kidding aside, a lot of long-term Republicans are saying, what is going on with this guy? How can this be happening? I know we've talked about this week after week. We'll see what happens after the debate next week, but so far the Trump tsunami is not subsiding.
No, I agree with that. I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think in the national polls he's going to even out, but he's evened out at a very, very high number, and he's way, way ahead of anybody else. We have seen some movement from Ben Carson, particularly in Iowa, and that's to be watched. So, look, Trump has lasted longer than I thought. He's lasted longer than most people have thought. We're in September, so we're essentially, out of the summer, at least in an unofficial way, and that matters. Now, the first votes are going to be cast, at the very beginning of February, so we still have some time. But he clearly has tapped into something, and it's not just Donald Trump. I think the fact that Ben Carson is doing well and
Carly Fiorina's
doing well. None of them have been politicians. None of them have held elective office. All of them, in a different way, is tapping into this anti-establishment, anti-political mood. It is interesting that Ben Carson and Trump and Fiorina, really, for that matter, have very, very different personalities. So I don't know how much of what. Obviously, some of Trump's appeal is his personality, but it goes beyond that, and he's tapped into it brilliantly. And we'll have to see if that is sustained or whether people grow bored of it, or over time they feel like, look, there's just no there. And at the end of the day, this is a flirtation. But when they cast a vote for president, they're going to look for something more. I don't know what will happen.
He's made some decisions that you would likely agree with. I mean, he stayed away from Kentucky, and he doesn't have a lot to say about Kim Davis. You wrote this week how this is really the wrong fight for Christians to wage. And I agree with you in terms of trying to die on this hill right now. It seems to me that there's a distinction between a public official or a public servant who is paid for by the taxpayers and somebody in the private sector. The religious liberty is fundamentally important. We cannot turn our backs to that important issue. I don't like seeing bakers shut down or florists run out of business because of their religious beliefs. But a county clerk who wants an accommodation, a religious accommodation, gets the accommodation and still vows to defy the courts seems to me to be the wrong cause to hang your hat on.
Yeah, I think that's very eloquently put. That's exactly my view. I feel very, very deeply about the religious liberties issue, and I'm quite concerned about it. I am really worried that based on the trajectory of the law that we're seeing based on the Supreme Court decision, most especially, there's going to be an attempt to turn people, Christians in particular, who believe that same-sex marriage is not the proper ordering for human beings, and that it's a violation of their faith. If they hold that, that's going to be synonymous with Jim Crow South, and they're going to try and turn Wheaton College into Bob Jones University. That really worries me a lot, and I think that we have to be alert to it, and we have to find ways to push back against it. But that requires being very, very sophisticated and intelligent in the fights that we pick. And I would cite the civil rights battle as that. If you go back and read the history of the civil rights, Taylor Branch's books and so forth, what you found was that they were very, very smart, the civil rights advocates, on who their heroes were and who their villains were and the kind of fights that they were going to set up. And that really worked because they found a way to touch the heart and the conscience of a country. And I'm worried with this Kim Davis situation, it is exactly the wrong kind of battle to have. This is not where you want to plant your flag for exactly the reason you said. She's a government official, and if she feels like she can't carry out this law in good faith, she could resign. But I felt like the judge, who's a relatively conservative person, bent over backwards to make an accommodation. He essentially said, the licenses will be issued, but we'll remove your name from it. And she still said that that's not enough. And I just don't think that that's defensible. I think that's lawless.
In fact, her lawyer yesterday, now they're making the case, evidently, that the licenses that have been issued are not lawful because her name isn't on it. So this is much. All I'm saying is it seems like it's way more than just somebody with deep religious convictions trying to work with the government and get and receive an accommodation to help her religious beliefs or to acquiesce to her religious beliefs. She's much more, it seems, of an sort of an adversarial role than that. This isn't just an accommodation. And Pete, I like a country in the public or the private sector that attempts to make an accommodation for somebody's religious beliefs. I brought up yesterday the case of the Muslim flight attendant who doesn't want to serve alcohol. Right. The airline wants to fire her, and she's saying, wait a minute, you can't you make an accommodation? And the airline could. They could assign her to flights with other flight attendants who could serve alcohol. I like it when we try. Now, it's not always going to work, but in Kim Davis's case, seems to me the government has tried, and she has rejected those attempts.
Yeah, I'm entirely with you, and I agree. Religious accommodation is a huge part of American history. Religious liberties is really the first liberties, the first freedom, and laws have been passed, including the RFRA law that Bill Clinton signed into law in the 1990s that does exactly that. And there are a whole series of criteria to say, this is how we're going to try and make these accommodations. But I do feel like in this case that the judge and the state are trying to make an accommodation. I get the sense from Kim Davis that she wants to be a martyr, that she believes that this is really a cause that she feels very deeply about.
And let's face it, Pete, putting her in jail helped that happen. I mean, even the people who were suing Kim Davis didn't want her incarcerated.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the judge did not have the capacity to fire her, so he was pretty limited in what he could do. He could put her in jail, or he could issue, I guess, a heavy fine. I'm not sure that a heavy fine would be any better for her, but he put her in jail for a short period of time, and then released her. But said, "Look, I'm releasing you now, but you can't interfere if your deputies are issuing these marriage licenses." And we'll take your name off of them. Again, I think that that's a reasonable accommodation. And if she doesn't buy into that, then there are going to be consequences to it.
Well, the consequences is she ought to be removed. I mean, if she doesn't want to resign,
but
I know
there's
can't
be removed. I think that's the problem. The judge doesn't have the capacity to fire her. I'm certain that if he did, there would have been.
He would.
The only way you could do it is through impeachment, and the legislature's not meeting right now, so his hands are tied.
Right. Let's take some phone calls if you don't mind on this, because it's obviously a very passionate issue. Pete Wehner joining us from Commentary Magazine, talking about the Kim Davis case. 800-655-MIKE if you'd like to weigh in. 800-655-6453. Here's Scott. Hey, Scott, welcome aboard. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Mike.
Good. What do you think about what's happening in Kentucky?
Well, here's my deal. This may have been mentioned already, but when this lady took office, that was not the law. And it became the law while she was in office. And had it been the law prior to her taking office, she may not have taken it. So it was kind of forced down on her.
Well, you say forced down on her. It's a little bit like the Muslim who converted, frankly, a year after she became a flight attendant. It's the same thing. It changed. Her circumstance changed. She became a Muslim. She opposes serving alcohol. Does the circumstance, Pete, does the fact that the law changed after she was in office, is that relevant or germane?
Well, I think it's germane in the sense that it does make her a somewhat more sympathetic figure. I mean, I understand that when she became a clerk, she didn't think she was going to have to issue same-sex marriage licenses. But the fact is that the law has changed. The Supreme Court has ruled. She is a government official, and she has to carry out the law. That's what you do when you're a clerk. You have to administer the law. And if she feels like she can't do that because the law has changed, she has to resign. I mean, that's traditionally what's happened. And frankly, there are a number of people, a lot of people actually in the country, who have done that. But in this case, you could say, okay, maybe she didn't have a lot of income. Maybe she's in a position where she can't resign. And again, I come back to the fact that the judge did say, okay, the licenses will be issued, but we'll take your name off of it if you're uncomfortable with that. That's my accommodation to you. You don't want to have your name on these licenses. I can respect that, but they have to be issued. Now, if she's not willing to do that, if she's not willing to accept that, then that's a problem. So I think the fact that gay marriage wasn't legal when she became a clerk makes her more sympathetic, but it doesn't change at the end of the day that she still has to administer the law.
Every time I say in passing with the Supreme Court ruling, same-sex marriage is the law of the land, I can count on about 200 emails from people saying, no, it's not the law of the land. The Supreme Court had no right to do this. I mean, it's interesting to me how, we talk about language mattering. What's the purpose of the Supreme Court? I mean, how do you negate a Supreme Court decision when you disagree with it? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I mean, there is something called the theory of nullification, and I don't believe in it, but it exists, and it says essentially that states do not have to carry out the order of the Supreme Court, that the Supreme Court doesn't have the constitutional right to decide these kinds of questions. I don't agree with that, and I just think it's a prescription for chaos and lawlessness. I mean, if the Supreme Court says that you have to integrate schools, and George Wallace and the legislature in Alabama says, no, we're not going to do it, is the argument that the Supreme Court can't decide on these things? We have really, I think, since Marbury v. Madison in 1803, began a trend in which the Supreme Court is kind of an arbiter on these kind of constitutional questions. And I'm not sure what happens if that isn't the case. And indeed, Lincoln himself, I know that Mike Huckabee keeps invoking Lincoln. But Lincoln himself, while he was a fierce critic of Dred Scott, didn't dispute that the court's decision in that particular case had to be obeyed. And Lincoln spoke very, very eloquently about the political religion of America was obedience to the law. So I think that it's very, very dicey and problematic to essentially say that individuals had the ability to nullify Supreme Court decisions and say, look, I don't agree with it, I don't consider it valid, I'm going to do it my way, because, what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and there are going to be situations in which when Supreme Court decides things that we care about and liberals say we're not going to impose them, we're going to rue the day.
Nate says we have our facts wrong on this case out of Kentucky. Nate, thanks for joining us. You're on with Pete Wehner here on the Mike Gallagher Show. Go ahead.
Hey, Mike. Hey, Pete. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you, Nate.
Hey, Nate.
Yeah, I wanted to, so I just heard you guys talking about this, and I wanted to point out that you got the facts wrong on a point here. Mm-hmm. So the issue was Kim Davis has been asking for an accommodation in this lawsuit from the beginning where she could have her name removed from these forms because she doesn't want to have her deputies issuing forms that say Kim Davis has issued this marriage license.
Right, correct.
But the issue is that the marriage is governed by Kentucky state law, and this is a law. This lawsuit is in federal court, and the federal judge doesn't have the power to change state law forms. Only the Kentucky legislature has the power to change the forms.
Well, wait a minute. First of all, that's disputable, and that's what's in contention. But you just said that Kim Davis wanted her name removed from the marriage licenses. The judge and Kentucky and Rowan County and the state figured out a way to remove her name from the marriage licenses. So she received the accommodation she requested, and now she's saying that's not enough.
That's not actually correct. I just tweeted you a link to the judge's order that he issued yesterday. What happened was the judge said to so the judge ordered Kim Davis to go to jail. And while she was in jail, he said to the deputies, you guys better issue the marriage licenses. And so they issued marriage licenses where they scribbled out her name and they put, Rowan County in place of Kim Davis. And so now Kim Davis's lawyers are saying, hey, we don't think these marriage licenses are valid because Kentucky law says they have to be issued a certain way.
Yeah, that is exactly the case. They can't come up with new licenses until the state legislature meets and they pass the law. So the question is, between now and January, what could be done? And the judge said essentially, this is not an ideal situation, but what we'll do is we're going to remove Davis's name and we're going to put Rowan County in its place. So her name is removed. Now, I understand that it's not an ideal situation, but it seems to me that given the facts, it's the best that can be done. And if her lawyer are not willing to accept that, and they say essentially, no licenses will be issued from our offices between now and January.
That's where you're incorrect.
Then there's going to be
requested that accommodation, and she's requested it. It's in her filing. She says, "Look, I'll be happy if these forms are changed so that they say Rowan County."
Right, but the forms can't be changed until January. So this is the.
So what do we do? What do they do between now and January?
That's
Nate?
Exactly right. What do we do, Nate?
What do you do in the meantime?
Well, the legislature could change the forms before January.
They're not meeting right now. They'd have to come into special session.
Right. They're not going to meet until January, and I presume there could be a special session called, right, Pete? I mean,
that's up to the governor, and maybe that would be an ideal situation, but that's up to the governor. The judge can't control whether there's a special session.
Yeah, but you make a good point, Nate, about the accommodation and what she has requested. I guess it's not quite as simple as saying she asked for the accommodation and got it, and now wants more. She's going to, in her own attorney's words, continue to defy the court. And I don't know what happens then. They put her back in jail. Do they incarcerate? Does she get bounced back and forth from the lockup to her home? How's this going to play out? And how should it play out? I mean, it's a complicated case. Nate, I appreciate you tweeting that information too as well. And Pete, rare day that you and I kind of agree a lot today. What the heck? You're either having a bad day or I am.
This is cognitive dissonance. I don't know what to do. I feel like the earth is shaking under my feet.
We didn't even get to Trump on the migrants from Syria and what a mess that is, and a real challenge worldwide, including the German model here that has got a lot of tongues wagging. We'll maybe catch up on that next week. Always great having you on the program. Keep it up.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Take care.
Thank you. Pete Wehner with us here on the Mike Gallagher Show.